can't get the click property. Boom. It's Stilly Boy. Back again with another one for you. Alrighty, where we at today, bro? I haven't made a video in a while either. Slacking, but this is a good one. I think it's gonna be interesting anyways. It's something that I have a lot of reoccurring conversations with people about. I have a lot of thoughts. Of course, you guys already know that, so we're about to share them right now, right here. And it's super controversial, Brad. We're gonna be talking about racism. That's right. Racism. Fun topic in it, you know? Um, Primarily, we're probably going to be focusing on a lot of where I'm from, Canada and the U.S. It's a lot of black versus white kind of beef, but particularly where I came from in Guyana as well. There's a lot of what's considered as you know uh, the Indo-Guyanese population versus the Afro-Guyanese population and that type of thing. Where I'm from in Guyana, man, I swear to you, it seemed like nobody's racist up until about election time. Like when I was growing up, it seemed like I got friends that are black and Indian and all. It feels like you live as a family, a big family. People go into people's houses. You could walk into the yard where when I was growing up, my area specifically, you go like people used to come into my house, walk in my yard, go in my pot, take out food. You know what I'm saying, that type of thing when we was growing up, at least. And like that's how we lived as brothers and sisters, almost sleeping on the same bed and all kind of thing. But around election, everybody got a little crazy. Things get out of hand, and that's how that goes down essentially. But coming back to where I'm at now, I live in Canada now. I'm very heavily invested into what's considered the like American sort of politics, and I've been having a lot of conversations with people about racism. I feel like there's a lot of things that we can kind of clear up. You know what I mean? So first on the list, let's get straight into it. Is there racism? For sure, racism exists now. It might be on a spectrum though, so there's a lot of different sort of types of what we might be considered racist, and this is going to be such a nuanced topic because everybody's going to consider different things racist or not, right? For instance, just I don't know, just noticing differences in between people, culture, and stuff like that. Some people might consider that a racist thing to do, or having a preference in like a dating preference or something like that, of uh, you know, types of flavors of people that you prefer to date or something like that. People might consider that racist. Some people are gonna say, "Well, yo, Dale, that's not even racism," but there is debates on that. Some people will consider that to be something that is racist, right? So if you just notice hair textures are different or something like that, or if you just notice melanin and the skin color and those type of things, people might consider that racist. And there's a whole sort of spectrum to what is considered racist or not. Generally, we're not even talking about the preferences and those type of things. Even some of the things that maybe are particularly racist, we're gonna get into a lot of it just now. But if we get into some things that do look racist, there are people who are maybe racist, right? Let's say if we could justify that this is purely racism, and they're not particularly dangerous in any form. They don't really pose any sort of threat to anybody. They don't really harm any other community or any other member. They don't really stop your bread from flowing or anything like that. All they do is like move out of your neighborhoods or something like that when you come in. And some of it could be due to some parts of it could be due to racism. Some parts could be due to lifestyles and those type of things. If you've got like let's say there's this thing called white flight. It's when white people move out of a certain area and move into other areas or move farther away from immigrant population as immigrant populations move into certain areas, and generally this is seen as a racist thing that people are doing. But you got to stop and think for a little while. You've got you know people who live in the area. Maybe it's not that populated. Maybe the houses are a little farther spread apart. Maybe, you know what I mean? Their community is very similar. They enjoy similar food, similar things, similar, like, you know what I mean? They like baseball. They got the baseball. I don't know, whatever it is, right? And so they have a certain culture around them that they're accustomed to. They grew up generations in this type of thing. They're accustomed to seeing the open plains in front of them, the ravines, whatever. And as people come in and they start populating an area, as buildings start to go up, as it becomes a little bit more urban, as it becomes a little bit different, people are, culturally not like assimilating and are not the same as the culture that was already there. Maybe, and they made a couple $100,000 off of the increase of their house. They're buying a house farther out. They're going out. They might just want to continue that lifestyle. They might like seeing open areas around them. They might not like having a neighbor right up close to them. They might not like, what I mean? So there's lots of reasons as to why white flight could be a thing other than racism. But even if we consider that a thing, them just moving and wanting to go on their own, wanting to live aside from, because they're like, yeah, I don't want to live around black people. I don't want to live around brown people. I don't want to live around, what I mean, you name it, say for whatever reason, right? And sometimes even that has a good reason. But I'm saying even if it doesn't, let's say you're not looking at, like, I remember when in Toronto, a lot of there was war torn countries and those type of things, and people mass immigrated from those countries. Canada took in a lot of refugees, placed them into an area, and of course, you know, anybody, you got like a group of young men coming in from a country that is war torn. They're accustomed to living a certain way and being a little grungy and rough around the edges. If someone talks to them funny, they have to kick into like fight or flight mode, or what I'm saying, they're and so they're like this. They're built like this. They come down, they touch down. A lot of these individuals, when they come, as well, young men, young women, they kind of, they learn the language. Their parents don't really know the language, and it's a bit rough because everything that when we get caught doing something, our parents get involved. When they got caught doing something, they had to explain what happened to their parents. You know what I'm saying? Somebody had to translate what happened to their parents, and usually it's them. And so they get to tell the whole narrative because their parents, nobody else could talk to them if they're speaking a whole different language and those type of things. And I've seen that happen in my lifetime, my generation, where these individuals was wilding. I'm talking about, like, everything going up because of these mans. I'm talking about everything getting crazy because of these mans. I'm talking about high trust society. We came into a high trust society. I remember you could go to the gas station, you could just pump gas at the gas station anywhere and walk in and pay. Now where we live, every gas station is prepaid. Why? Because man's rinse those gas stations. I remember when people were doing this, going in, what I'm saying, and filling up people's cars. Originally, I remember when it became the one gas pump at the back somewhere, like at the end where people were normally like attacking the most, being the one that you had to prepay. And now it's like universal. Now it's like every gas station. You know what I mean? I remember when, questionnaires for like getting insurance or various other things, there wasn't all these hoops that you had to jump through because they trusted people for the large parts. And then I remember when people started scamming and conning the insurance companies to the point where they started putting on all these measures in place and whatnot. Now these days they need all kinds of different 50-step verification, all this type of stuff, right? And so largely, high trust societies, people that come from other societies and they don't integrate very well, it gets a little bit crazy. And you can see these type of things happening, and you could see why sometimes people are like, yo, I'm out. Like, these demographics are forced into a certain area, and whatnot. Now, we can talk about immigration and all that type of stuff, but we're here to talk about racism specifically, and we're here to challenge some of the narratives on racism. And I'm here to really defend Canada, U.S., and all of those type of things when it comes to these type of things. But absolutely, racism does exist on a spectrum, and it could be in various other forms. It can. So I talked about some of the less dangerous forms. I'm talking about, like, maybe I don't like you, maybe I don't like your skin color, maybe I don't like your hair. Like, that's not particularly dangerous to anybody. That's not institutionalized. That's not nothing, right? I mean, you could say, well, yeah, it can affect me from getting a job or something like that, right? I mean, that exists everywhere too. That's not even just white or black or anything. I remember this one time I went and applied for a job, and I was well overqualified for the job. At this point, I was like a seasoned veteran contractor, years in the business. I was applying for a cabinet maker job when I first came back to Canada, and it was just like I was supposed to be like a helper, and I wanted to go into this cabinet industry just to see what it's like and sort of get an idea. And I knew I could climb to the ranks of like learning this industry very well, because ultimately I was looking into potentially opening my own cabinet company. Of course, I pulled up, and I'm not gonna name the demographic that was there, but there was a certain type of people from a certain type of demographic, not white people, by the way. I'm gonna say it's brown people. I'm not gonna say which type of brown people, but they spoke their own language, they eat their own food, they gave me one look up and down, they talked to me for a little bit, they're like, no, 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 we're good, like, type of thing. And they asked me straight up, where you from? Like, what I'm saying? They didn't want, what I'm saying, a Guyanese man working with them. They want their own compadre, people working around them. And I didn't, you could say that's racist, you know what I'm saying? You could. And I guess somebody will say, hey, practically, Dale, that is racism. Okay, I get you, you know what I'm saying? All I'm saying is I totally get it. The mans eat the same food. They speak the same language. They run their shop. Like, you know what I'm saying? They share culture. You know what I'm saying? They want to work with people that are like that. I don't even hold them for that. You know what I'm saying? That's me. I'm different. But absolutely, racism does exist. Again, it's on a spectrum. There's like the light versions of it, but then there's like the heavier version. The heavier version is the systematic, oppressive sort of nature, right? Now, this is what is argued for the most part. So we're not talking about like all these lighter forms or whatever right now, but this is what is listed so far. This is what we're getting into so far, is this whole, uh, you know, people groups as an entire demographic, let's say the black population, being systematic racism. We're talking about over incarceration of populations. We're talking about, what I mean, actual dangerous, what's considered dangerous racism or hatred, you know what I mean? And we're going to talk about some other factors as well throughout this. Anyway, so we established this racism. We established that there is like lighter versions of this on the spectrum. We established that there is a little bit more dangerous version, which is probably the version that is worth looking at, because the other ones are just like, whatever. They don't like me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Maybe we don't like them. I don't know. Whatever you might want to say. By the way, let me just say, little boy loves everybody. You know what I'm saying? Equally. Not to say I don't have like my own sort of preferences when it comes to like the dating world or anything like that. But talking about, and that's a different story when it comes to you know who you're marrying or something like that. It doesn't implicate you as a person when it comes to who how you love people, right? Love for people should be a Christian value. It should be something that comes from the fact that they're made in the imago Dei of God, and this should be something that you should want to strive to reflect. Love for people in general. Of course, there's different types of love and all that type of stuff that applies to other people. You got romantic and all this other stuff, right? And so, saying that you have your own sort of like, uh, you know, like dating preferences or something like that. That doesn't that doesn't mean that you don't have this whole sort of like love of God that's in you for people in general, right? So we love everybody, but we're gonna get into, the specifics here. There's there's a massive problem with generalization. That's the first thing that we want to touch on when it comes to this, right? Generalizing is one of the main problems I see. When we talk about disenfranchised, when we talk about people having various starting points, a lot of times the generalization comes down like this, right? People will argue that we're not starting at the same sort of on the same playing field. We're not competing in the same sort of world, right? And they'll generalize and they'll say like black folks are not starting at the same point, and they'll say white people are, uh, starting at a different starting point, and they're able to achieve more because of their the advantages that they've been given, the privileges that they've been given in life. And then they'll say that the black folks, we're starting from a line that's way behind. And while there are black folks that can surpass that line or whatever, or overcome those hurdles, they're systematically as a community, this means that black communities are going to underperform. That's the type of nihilistic stuff that I don't like anyways. You know what I'm saying? I don't like when people talk like that at all about themselves or about any community. You know what I mean? As if, just sort of taking the ball out of their court, telling them that they have no control over their life, and holistically that their communities are oppressed. And I don't like that already. But there's a massive problem there with the generalization. It fails to look at the individual circumstances and the individual circumstances that led to those circumstances. For instance, right? If you do see a particular white individual or particular black individual, there is no telling what starting point who is starting at. You know what I'm saying? You could be looking at a white man who, if we're talking about financially, who comes from a poorer family than another individual black person, or vice versa, right? And so it's generally not a good idea. It's a good idea to not generalize. It's a good idea to not say black people are, man, we don't know. You don't know. Look at the individual cases. You could look at an individual case where a black person has both of their parents in their life, where they're living in the suburbs, where they're doing very well. And then you could look at an individual case where there's a white person who is totally disenfranchised, who didn't grow up with a mom or dad, who really were in the foster care system all their life, who've experienced all kinds of abuse and those type of things. And that does exist. So I don't like the generalization. You know what I mean? And if we looked at, you know, family lineages and money and all that, it's also not conclusive when it comes to the results that's produced in someone's life. So you could come from the dirt of the dirt situation, right? And I've seen this tons of times where a lot of the people who made it and they're rich and have money and they're doing well, and you know what I'm saying, have fix their life and have joy and peace and happiness and all this type of stuff, came out from the dirt, bro. They grew this thing from where they didn't have their mom and dad in their life. They didn't have their, you know what I'm saying, all these support systems in their life, and they really had to just drink sugar water and go to school. They had one set of clothes, and they just had to like wash that clothes every night and hang it out and go. You know what I mean? People have made it from those situations into poverty, into prominent positions. And there are people who came from very cushiony situations and are just straight on crack, you know what I'm saying, in the street, drugged out, bugged out, you know what I'm saying? So those are not markers of where you can go in life, or anything like that. It doesn't really contribute or help to determine anything when you look at like the scope of like what people end up doing on their output. What that determines is what's being put in you what kind of nature versus nurture or something like that they call it, right? So now what just has been gone into you by what you're producing, what comes out of you. And we have this reaction as humans, we have this ability to react to things that happen in our lives. For instance, if someone, I don't know, punches you in the face, right? As a human being, you could react and go, hey, what's up with this guy? Is something okay? Is he all right? Like, is he crazy? Like, is something wrong with him? Like, is he mad? Like, is he upset? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, does he need help? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, or you could choose what your output is going to be. And if someone punches you in the face, you could lash out and pull out something and do them something. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? That what the hit that you received is what got into you. What the external factor that you can't control. What you can control is the way you react to it. And similarly in life, no matter what you go through, it's not your life outcome is not going to be dependent on what is being put into you, but mo- that is a factor. I'm not saying it's not a factor. What I'm saying though is how you react to it is going to determine what's going to happen with your life specifically, right? So generalization, just a very bad idea. And this is something that I see amongst the topic of racism a lot, is the generalization. And and I want to mention this one since we're at it as well, is this idea of this like nihilistic thinking, this sort of idea of you know the what we call you know sort of like shifting the blame, right? It's the idea of not being able to take accountability for anything that's happening in your life, right? It's always someone else. So this person did this to me, or it's the white oppressor. Oh, it's the this, it's the that. You know what I'm saying? It's the people that are keeping me down. It's all because they don't want to hire me because I'm this, or like, so everything. You're not checking to see, yo, are there things about me that I need to like? Is there okay, on a basic level, right? Let's say there are things, individual factors that you need to correct. Okay, put set that aside, right? Even if it was the case that you know everyone is against you for a certain reason, you need to take the ball back in your court, bro. You need to take the playing field of your life into your hand. You know what I'm saying? You cannot, if you say all these external factors is why I can't get ahead in life, or why I'm not, where I want to be, then you've effectively taken your life's control and given it away. You've given up. You've said that, like, I can't do this. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not in my hand, it's not in my control. Taking accountability and bringing it back in your court and saying, hey, I can accomplish this, I can do this, I can, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can, control my life. I have mastery over my life. That is going to produce, this is now you taking the power back into yourself. And there's no other way. I'm sorry. Like, you cannot, unless you accept that you have the power to change your circumstances, do the things that you want to do, to accomplish, to become the person you want to become, to be in the position that you want to become, there is nothing to do for you here. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I don't know if you could get lucky and some uncle or something, but even then you're just gonna mash it up. Let's say someone gives you wealth or gives you some kind of position of power, authority, you're probably gonna mash it up. You know what I'm saying? Unless you become the type of person that can maintain that and whatnot. So retaining power back to yourself and taking accountability and, like, what I'm saying, not shifting the blame to everyone else, right? And I'm not saying these external factors again don't affect your life. Of course they're gonna affect your life, and it's fair to even say that you're starting at a different point, but it's on you to be able to take that, what was considered a disadvantage, quote unquote. A lot of times when you appropriate it into God's hand, like this, you know what I'm saying? You guys know I'm Christian. This is a Christian podcast, you know what I'm saying? You could leave this part if you don't want it, but you know, in the scripture it says that all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to His purposes. And so, you know what I mean? Everything that's happening in your life can be repurposed. Whether you went through abuse, whether you have mental health issues, whether you're dealing with, like, you know what I'm saying, certain disorders or whatever it is that's happening in your life, you can repurpose that for good, and you can make it into something that you turn into not a disability but a superpower. You know what I'm saying? And we've seen this happen over and over again. All the things that people thought was meant to hold them down, to keep them back, becomes the things that they can speak into the life of another believer, speak into the life of another person who's going through that situation. It becomes, you know, you don't see great books written about dudes that just had great lives. You know, everything was honky dory. All this. It's always the people who overcome all kinds of craziness that ends up creating the greatest feats and the greatest tales that we've ever known. You know, so definitely, you know, there's something to be said for that ability to take control and power over your circumstance in your life, just even in here, you know what I'm saying? So, what's the solution? You know what I'm saying? We established that racism is true. We established it's on the spectrum. We established, you know what I'm saying, that there's a massive problem with generalization. We established that you have the power over your own life. But what is the solution? How do you fix it? Simple solution is the solution, because what we're talking about here is hate. You know what I'm saying? When we talk about racism, we're talking about hate. So what's the solution to hate? Love. I'm gonna defer you guys to a video I have on love. That's a Christian centered video about how, you know, God is love, and like how, you know, loving Him appropriately requires loving the people that He also created in His image, and all those type of things. And so this is something that's super important to it's the antidote to hate, you know what I'm saying? So forgiveness is a byproduct of love as well. And so definitely you want to extend forgiveness, especially for the communities that have been hurt, that consider themselves as communities who have went through past atrocities and those type of things, to be able to let go, bro, and just say, yo, you know what, I forgive this person. And even in a situation where someone is actively wrong, still moving with that heart of forgiveness, moving with that heart of compassion. Because when you see somebody, even if they're straight up blatant racist and they're like, you know, yelling at you, first of all, most times if someone's just like crazy yelling at you, some kind of racist blurting out something, most times that person's probably just nuts. Like they're probably just crazy. They're probably just off their medication or something like that. And, you know, not to say that there is no circumstance of this just being genuine racist and hate. And even that we need to explore a little bit better, because we have to ask what happened. Why is that person like that? Why do they think like that? But when you have this perspective of forgiveness and love in your heart, you're not offended by it. You're just looking at someone and you're like, man, God help this person. God, you know what I'm saying? Like, what's up with this guy? Like, you know, and you're thinking in yourself, like, man, like I could have been like that. Like, if it wasn't for the grace of God and all this type of stuff. You have love for those who are persecuting you. You're praying for them. You care for them. You want to see them better. This forgiveness thing is, you know, it's so deep. It's so like cleansing. It's so amazing, not only for the person and for the effectiveness of your life and your witness, but even for yourself from your inside, for how you for your own sort of health overall, spiritual and all this other stuff, is this idea of this love and this forgiveness. How you move, how you react to things is going to be affected by whether you have that love inside of you, whether you choose to forgive people or not. And this is what you see a lot in these communities around these discussions, is hate trying to fix hate. You know what I mean? Racism trying to fix racism. You know what I'm saying? You're just taking people, and then instead of judging them by their character and the content of their character and their actions and their deeds, you're looking at skin color above everything. If a black man shoots a black man, Nobody cares if a white man shoots a white man. Nobody cares if a black man shoots a white man. Nobody cares if a white man shoots a black man. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Well, some people do care in the other situation as well, right? But you got this whole massive overblown reaction, George Floyd burning down cities type of like reaction going on. Why is that? It's because we're basically viewing people as, instead of human beings, and just looking at the raw circumstances. Oh, this is an unfortunate tragedy. Someone got killed. Here's the person who's evil and wicked. They shouldn't have done that. They're gonna get jailed, or you know what I'm saying. We're gonna let the justice system do its thing, and if there's injustice, we're gonna fight it from within the justice system. We're gonna, if there's something within the system that's, we're gonna also fight it within the system. We're gonna basically try to get people elected to try to stomp out this type of stuff. Okay, you know, this is how civilized democratic society works, right? And this is what we do in order to be able to fix those things. We don't go looting and burning buildings and, like, you know what I'm saying? So creating more tension, creating more hate, creating more division, creating more, you know what I'm saying? So that's one of the other thing. So moving on, judging people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Finding out who your common enemy is. This is super important to fixing the issue. Who is the enemy? You need to recognize there's no, look, the devil doesn't care about black, white, blue, purple, pink. You know what I'm saying? None of that. Devil wants to divide and conquer. He hates you the same way he hates. We're a human race, right? And genetically, we're pretty much 99.9% the same. Any two humans anywhere in the world, 90.9% the same genetically, right? And there's really minor differences when it comes to genetics as humans. And we kind of understand this to a degree, right? You've got cities and villages where, people are fighting inside of their cities or their villages, but let's let somebody else come from somewhere else and, see what happens. Countries that are fighting amongst themselves, but let somebody else come from another country and see what happens. All of a sudden, the whole country is together, united against this front. And I guarantee you, if an alien invasion was to happen tomorrow, the whole of the human race would come together and be like, yo, we gotta stomp this out. You know what I mean? We'll probably go back to fighting each other right away if we do manage to conquer the alien invaders. However, we would, we would definitely, bond together as the human race to stomp that out. And so there is like superpowers in us being united, right? And us not like dividing over silly things. And so our common enemy, does not care about your skin color. The devil is out here to steal, kill, and destroy. He looks at souls as souls, and that's who our enemy really is. And so understanding the tactics of our true enemy, the person who is pitting us against each other to try to destroy each other, to try to, like, tear each other apart in an attempt to divide us in order so that he can overthrow and have his way with us, is, super important towards fixing the problem, is understanding who the real enemy is here. And it's not other human beings on the face of the planet. Sometimes it's demonic influences through ideas. This is why on this show we challenge other ideas, we challenge other systems, we challenge other beliefs. This is why on this show I talk to you directly. If you're a Muslim, I tell you that you're straight wrong, like da 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 da. You know what I'm saying? If you're Hindu, I'll be like, yo, dog, you're straight wrong, da 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 da. By the way, let me interject this real quick, right? Even if you're a different sort of idea or belief, there are some ideas and beliefs that are different, but they're not dangerous, or sometimes they're even better. You know what I'm saying? So we're not threatened by ideas and things that are not dangerous. Like, for instance, we had the Japanese, you guys know the World Cup is going on right now. We had the Japanese people come down to the States, and this is like a whole viral trend of videos going around now where people are just astonished at like how amazing America actually is, because the way they hear about America is like it's this dark and weird place, and especially when they come from weird, real dark and weird places, and they come to America and they see, yo, this place is kind of cool. It's free. Like we could walk around. People are generally nice. Like da 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 da. Right. And so they're just like there's a whole TikTok vibe trend. You could pause. You could go check that out. Come back. You'll see what I mean. Right. But the Japanese fans came down and they went to a game. And after the game, they cleaned up the stand. Now, I heard my dog told me he went to Japan. I heard it's really clean there. I heard they teach this to their kids as a value system from since they're young. You know what I mean? I have a we had we had the Knicks win the basketball game and almost destroyed New York. I'm saying that like, yo, if the Knicks win again next year and then again the next year, they probably won't have a city after a time. You know what I'm saying? Because totally different reactions, by the way. But in Japanese culture, although it's a different culture here, that is an aspect of that culture that's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's something that we should take. You know what I'm saying? As people, right? And there's lots of things good about Western culture as well, and certain aspects of that as well that we could point at. You know what I'm saying? One of the things I definitely like is, and this is something that feminism has seek to sort of destroy, is the way how people protect women and children. You know what I'm saying, in their community. We kind of look out for them as an entire demographic, and even like the chivalry type of stuff with like where you take a bag from a woman that's like fetching a heavy load or something like that. That's something that's common, I would say, in our culture. Canadians are known for being polite, like not honking your horns when you're driving. You know what I'm saying? It's very rare, at least where I'm from, Toronto, Ontario. Like people rarely ever honk their horn at you and those type of things, and people hold the doors for you and all this type of stuff. So there are cultures and things about cultures that are beautiful that we can take. And there are things that about cultures that like we don't even need to take, but it's not something that we should oppose. For instance, Japanese people, again, I'm just going to use them. They might come, maybe we don't eat sushi, but they eat sushi and they open up sushi bars or whatever. I know some of y'all like the sushi, so Guangzhou, enjoy your sushi, you know what I'm saying? But it's good to have, this type of things available in a city where you can go and get various different types of foods and experience different cultures and those type of things. It's really good. However, let's say you don't like sushi, so what? It's not harming anybody eating the sushi or whatever. But then there are things that can be harmful. There are ideas that can be harmful, right? So let me see if I could find a good one. So you got like I mentioned the war torn stuff, right? So if you've got young able bodied men coming in from active war zones and things like that, and in societies where they had to be tough and like where they just or if you got people who came from cities where they throw garbage on the ground and I'm saying, stuff like that, and then when they come, you don't want them to carry on those traits. You know what I'm saying? You do understand to a degree that it's going to be a culture shock and there's going to be a bit of an adjustment period where someone is adjusting to the new climate, essentially climate. But you know, you expect them to assimilate. You expect them to like leave those things behind, right? If they used to throw garbage in the street back home where they came from, and they come here and they throw a bottle on the ground, and people are like, yeah, how are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Pick that up, put that in the car. You know what I mean? Eventually, you expect them to be like, oh snap, I can't do this here, and then and you can scale that to whatever degree you want. You know what I mean? When I'm talking about war torn, like sometimes people have an knack for violence or something like that, or they have ideas of like how there's the crazy, some of the craziest things is like if you come from a country where women are supposed to dress a certain way and then you come to a culture where women are not dressed that way and you see that as revealing. You could see it, and especially if you're taught that women, when they dress this way, it's like they want you know what I'm saying, they're looking for a certain type of attention. And so now you as a man, you're thinking, oh, it's validated for me to like, catcall, or it's validated for me to like harass her, or like, I mean, even worse, sometimes people are out here straight up violating and, raping women and those type of things. So those are the type of things that we're talking about that are particularly dangerous, that you want to stay away from when it comes to, assimilation. So, judging people on the content of their character, not the color of their skin, finding out who your common enemy is. I referred you guys to my video on love for that. Pray for those who are persecuting you, but even racist and those type of things. Who experiences racism? That's a good question. You know what I'm saying? This is one that's kind of controversial, although it shouldn't be controversial. All people of all demographics experience racism, and all people of all demographics have racist people in their society. You know what I'm saying? And it's not super uncommon for brown people to be racist to other people groups, or black people to be racist to other people groups, or what I'm saying. This is very common thing to experience within those cultures, again, on the spectrum and whatnot. And it depends on what you consider racism and or not. But all people of all groups experience racism, even between themselves, by the way. You know what I'm saying? So there's brown people that are racist against other brown people. Like, I'm a Guyanese person. I'm sort of Indo-Guyanese, so my family is like Indian, but we're not really Indian. And sometimes some real Indians don't really like us like that. Sometimes we're racist against other Indian people. You know what I'm saying? Because, there's a whole thing with Guyanese people appropriating Indian culture and then using their music and that type of stuff and making what's called chutney music, and it's very like weird type of stuff that they're doing. It's very strange, and I mean, I get it. Like, for us, it's like fun. We're being silly. We're recreating this music that we like, in our own sort of genre. And, to a degree, our people are enjoying that and having fun with it. But I kind of get where the Indians are coming from, and they feel like we're taking classics and masterpieces that they made, and then making some kind of mockery song off of it, and and there's various other things that are guaning elements there as well. And we're very different people, by the way. Like a Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese person is a very different person from like an actual India dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, very different when it comes to, you know, various things. If you live in Toronto or Ontario, you definitely get what I'm talking about. I'm not even gonna go into it, but it's enough that we're basically not the same anymore. We're different culture altogether, different language, and different like music that we listen to, different vibe altogether. Generally, Guyanese Indo people are basically Caribbean, although Guyana is not technically a part of the Caribbean. It's a part of like a whole CARICOM system. You guys know what I'm talking about there. Some of you, anyways, but we're with that whole vibe. You know what I'm saying? There's a whole set of islands and things like that. We're all kind of with that whole same type of vibe. We're more close to those individuals than you know our Indian ancestors. And then you got all types of brown people. You got the Sri Lankans, and you got what I'm saying, even within like you got like the Bangladeshis, and you got all these different types of people. Same thing with white people. You got all kinds of white people. You got like Italians, and you got like what I'm saying, the Irish, and you got like the British, and you got what I'm saying, like this various other type of people. Sometimes you got all types of people from different places. Like, you got Spanish people that are white, Spanish people that are black, Spanish people that are brown. You know what I'm saying? So it's a very, very interesting, big, nuanced world that we live in, and we can't this goes back into the generalization thing. We can't really take things to be too thing, but people experience racism within their own sort of set culture, that type of thing, right? There's silly things that divide people. When we talk about you know, like, I don't know, we're looking at people's like tribalism and that type of stuff. If you go to Africa or you go to India, there's like caste systems and those type of things. There's like weird things that people try to divide themselves into, and so it's important to watch out for that. Other forms of classism. Okay, yeah, we talked about that as well. Fighting against racist policies. So this is where some of the rubber hits the road, is like looking at policies themselves and thinking, okay, this is a racist policy. For instance, if you have a policy like, there's apartheid and those type of things in certain countries where, it's literally different ruling classes and those type of things. Only certain types of people, whether it be racism or classism, or like sometimes it's tribalism or various other isms that separate people and have people under a different sort of a two-tier justice system. So some people are being executed on a different sort of plateau. Like, let's say there's places where the death penalty can be applied to, and there's a big thing with Israel passing a new law. Now, mind you, that's a nuanced topic by itself, but a lot of people look at it as, okay, the Palestinians can experience being put to death, what I mean, or by hanging, and Israelis aren't. Now, it's not exactly how the law works, it's which court is adjudicating the case. And so what happens though is like the court that adjudicates the case, and the cases in which that court is allowed to give out that death sentence, is the court that ultimately tries a lot of the cases for the Palestinian people. And so practically it works out that way. But you've got apartheids in various other places in the world. I believe, I'm looking for the name. It's the place where Trevor Noah is from, where they actually have an apartheid system going on. I forget what the place is called. South Africa, I believe, right? And various other places where you've got actual slavery still happening in certain parts of Africa and those type of things onto today. And so that's a big deal as well to look into. Let's see. That's a lot. Okay, so let's look at let's see. Genetics. Oh, let's look at genetics. Then I'm just going through. I think on my rants, I kind of touched on other points that I had written down, so we could just skip a lot of them. Genetics is probably a big thing to look at, but if you look at the genetic makeup of people, again, I mentioned this earlier, human beings across the globe, any two humans, you can look at it, it's about 99.9% match. However, that 1% accounts for various things that we see, which are not things that are mutable. For instance, like straight hair, or like the physical features that usually separate people. Those are things that are within the genetic pool that ultimately it's people say it's an adaptation. Well, what they don't mean is that we, like, if you put a guy with straight hair in a climate where it's really hot for a really long time, he's gonna develop sort of like what do I say, like curly hair, or what I'm saying, like more tightly knitted hair essentially, right? But if you but people can survive, they're more adapt to surviving in certain climate with certain features. For instance, melanin in skin for the hot sun, or even the hair thing. For instance, that your hair growing up taller on your head, and being more tightly wound together, it blocks the sunlight from getting to your actual scalp. It causes less sweating. It causes you to not have to drink as much water. Causes you to thrive better. Just a slight advantage in hot climate, for instance. And so that will guarantee the survival and the thriving of those people in those areas over the thriving of other people in those areas. So now, lighter skin, blue eyed type individual with longer hair, they're gonna thrive a lot farther away, right? Like, meaning colder climates or in other areas where it's not that it's not that hot year round or something like that. So you've got sort of the genetics that like it's called natural selection essentially. Certain people are going to do better in certain areas than other. However, there is a uniformity amongst the human genome genetics. Every every sort of school of thought on this will tell you that we're all from a common ancestor. So basically what this teaches us is that we came from the same individuals, whether you believe that's Adam and Eve created by God, uh, or whether you believe that this is some sort of like mutation of some sort of other animal turning into ultimately Homo sapiens and then becoming human beings at some point. You believe that there is these original like transformation, and then all of humans come from this. This is proven mathematically, even going back into the generations. If you were to go back into the generations and everybody had to come from individual ancestors, it would make it so that more and more people would exist. But when you look back in history, you see less and less people populating the earth and more people coming from less and less people. And so as you keep going back, what you realize is we all share what the only way for this to make sense is that we share ancestors ultimately. You know what I mean? And so everybody sort of came from a common ancestor. That's probably super important to understand when it comes to how we think about racism and those type of things, because we're not as divided as we think. You know what I mean? In this sense, slavery is a super important one to touch on. I'm gonna try to speed run through these points, anyways. My point is on slavery is that everyone experienced slavery, bro. White people, black people, all types of people experience slavery. This is not something that like is new. Now, did black people experience slavery a little more recently in American history? Of course, but if you look at the Europeans, for instance, back in the days, what was happening is that Europeans were buying and freeing other European slaves based on their Christian values. They were like buying and freeing slaves, and it became more and more difficult for you to own slaves. Also, they had this whole idea of not owning another Christian slave. I like to say it this way: Christianity is like a bomb that like exploded, and the effects of it continued on. So you have the cross and Jesus Christ, and then the explosion of Christianity from there. And then you have the years following where things are getting refined and worked through, and you're coming from it's refining things along the way. It's always been progression, you know what I'm saying? So when you look at American slave trade or something like that, and you look at Ottoman slave trade, and you look at, you know what I'm saying, the British slave trade. Sorry, I'm going in kind of not so chronological order. You know what I mean? You look at, going back to, the Romans and the Greeks and the Phoenicians and the Byzantines and what I'm saying, Persians and the Babylonians and what I mean, all the way back, Amalekites, Midians, whatever you want to look at, what I'm saying, Mongolians, all this, there was horrible different practices and atrocities committed. There was universal slavery everywhere, pretty much for the most of human history. This was very normal practice. However, with the explosion of Christianity, you've got like this sort of refining happening. You've got Europe becoming more and more difficult to own slaves, and then you've got the sourcing of slaves from Africa, now mostly because they considered them hedonistic. Well, when they got to America, for instance, and they needed slaves, and they were trying to source slaves from the local population there. You guys know how that worked out because of European diseases that ultimately affected the native population in the Americas. They basically sourced them from West Africa. And by the way, when they were buying slaves from West Africa, they were buying slaves from African slave traders a lot of the time. These were people in Africa that were already enslaved. A lot of times they didn't buy free people and brought them necessarily. A lot of these times they were buying people that were already captured, that were already slaves in Africa, that were being sold by other African slave traders to the Western slave traders. And they were largely looking for people from Africa too, because they can deal with the climate, they can deal with the hostility of the environment that they were going into on the plantations that they were going into. And so that is the reason. And then ultimately, just on a speed run, it is the white British and Christian, like largely Christian arguments that ultimately destroyed slavery across the globe, and they spent a lot of their time, talent, treasures eradicating slavery. By the way, just to mention that, although this is slightly misleading statistic, it is true that only 2% of all America owned slaves. By the way, all Americans, right, owned slaves. It's only about 2%, and they were largely on a lot of these massive industrial plantation type style things where they were like, they were the majority of the slaves, and there were black slave owners even in America, by the way. So it's important to think about in that manner, and many of the people that fought against and ultimately helped to abolish slavery were actually other white Christian individuals as well. So I know these are not popular opinions. This is not what you're being taught in schools and whatnot, but this is the reality of the history, if you will. Were to actually go to a list of our abolitionists, if you were to actually look up how slavery was abolished and some of the arguments that were used, that sometimes, a lot of times, there was largely Christian arguments from the Imago Dei, as I mentioned, the idea that we're made in the image of God and those type of things that help to eradicate slavery. But many people, if you look up the Barbary slave trader, for instance, this is where Arab slave traders were just kidnapping white Christian people and enslaving them for the very same reason. Essentially, they considered them hedonic. They considered them, kuffars essentially, and they, seen them as free game for being enslaved. And then you got Thomas Jefferson writing letters being like, hey man, what did we ever do to you guys? And you got the I don't know if it was the Sultan or whatever. You got one of these leaders of the caliphate or whatever it was at the time, Muslim leaders writing back and saying, you didn't do nothing to us, but it's just, this is what our book tells us to do, essentially. And that was what his response was. I believe I read that exchange in one of our previous videos. Let me see if I can remember. I think it's in a series. I got one that's called It's Not the West. I got one that's called It Is Islam. Oh, I think it's in the It Is Islam video. If you guys want to look at that video, you guys will be able to pull what I'm saying from that. So, it's important to understand that history as well. Whenever people are talking about slavery in, American culture, a lot of times none of these people went through slavery. And a lot of times the people who they're talking about that enslaved them never enslaved anyone, you know what I'm saying? And right now, there are places in Africa, in Arab nations, where there is actual slavery, like that same form of buying and selling and being born into slavery happening certain parts of the brown world, that's happening as well, you know what I'm saying? Where these people are being enslaved in like clay factories, like brick making factories or brick bursting factories. You guys can look that stuff up essentially, but it is still happening in the world today, and it's largely propagated by like black, brown, and Arab type individuals, what I mean, or in Islamic nations and those type of things, where you still see slavery. Although, you know, sex trafficking and stuff like that is considered slavery, which rightfully so, it is slavery essentially. But I think it's a little bit of a miss. It's kind of like talking past each other when we talk about that stuff, because people don't. That's not what people are thinking about when they're thinking about slavery. They're thinking about more like transatlantic type slavery, buying and selling people. Although, if you look into sex trafficking, that is practically what's happening. That's why, if you looked it up right now, you'll see that today has more slavery than historically, because they'll say there's 50 million slaves today in the world existing, because they're counting a lot of those type of people. You know what I mean? The people who are sex workers and those type of things, right? And so, yeah, I think we kind of covered that fairly. I mentioned that nobody's experiencing actual slavery now. They're talking about ancestral wrongs, but a lot of times that is something that probably shouldn't be looked at anyways. Because if we talk about money passing through generations, all it takes is one crackhead in between to mash up the whole generation's wealth, and then you've got people starting over from afresh. And if you were to look into the lineage, by the way, like I said, only 2% of all Americans would have owned slaves. So chances are the white person you're looking at across from you never owned slave or benefited. They probably were just regular, hardworking. They were probably doing their own work on their farms and whatnot, and they probably largely didn't even agree with slavery as a practice and that type of stuff, ancestrally, anyways, right? And so, looking at someone, it's very unlikely that that person's family owned slaves. However, in the likelihood that person's family member actually owns slaves, you have to look through their lineage to see where the wealth went, who busted it up at some point. There's people that, like, I'll give you an example. I believe, like, my great grandfather owned a huge plot of land. If you guys know me, and you guys probably know, there's a place called Ginger Dam. They call it Ginger Dam because my grandfather's name was Ginger. He used to own that land, right? And a lot of that wealth, uh, you know, long story short, it seems like one of the aunts kind of took that and went with it. And so some of it, the speculation is supposed to be going to, my pops and our fams, but we didn't get anything from it, you know what I'm saying? And so my pops worked as a fisherman with his pops, and, like, they built their wealth that way. He ultimately started, like, cooking and selling pepper pot at his spot. He ultimately started mining his own pigs and killing the pigs and selling the meat. And then he ultimately started, like, a grocery store where he was selling other products. He ultimately started, like, a mini Walmart type deal where you're selling all kinds of things. We got, like, a band. We started selling drinks wholesale, and we got a truck. We started shipping the drinks around the place. We started a boutique where we started selling clothes. We started a video game, like a cassette shop. This is where we were selling music. They used to record the music on these cassettes, and my brother used to sell it to people. But, you know what I mean? That's how my dad built wealth. And so if you look at a particular individual, maybe their family lineage had money, but that doesn't mean they came up out of that money. You know what I'm saying? So it's very unlikely that, you know, that is the case and whatnot. Systematic injustice is probably something we should look at, right? When it comes to America, for instance, right? You know, this is the place where, we might say, oh, there's systematic injustice. First of all, really, nah, there's really not. You know what I'm saying? If you look at, the actual laws on the book, there's no laws that are to benefit one people or not another. It's kind of like you shoot someone, you kill someone, you go to jail for this amount of time. These are the laws on the books. If it's proven that, you have various other, subsets of first degree, second degree, all this type of stuff, and you have, like, ways that the courts look at this stuff. Now, I personally spend a lot of time looking at court cases and literally watching 7-hour videos of court cases to help to figure out this stuff. And the court system largely works. But if you look at America as a whole, you got a black president that made it to the top of, the most powerful position in the country. You've got, you know what I'm saying, black people that are like, you got like the most black million and billionaires that are produced in anywhere in the world, like one of the highest producers of black billionaires and people who stack massive wealth. You got even the poorest people in the country that's still 1% of the richest people in the world. Like if you got running water and like a lot of this other stuff, these are like largely amenities that like the rest of the world is not capable of having. And so, you know what I mean, we live in amazing countries, bro. Like freedom, and like we can go anywhere, we can quit our jobs tomorrow, the government will probably take care of you, mind you, like they probably take care of you and your family. They probably give you government housing, give you a check, they probably send you to school if you want to go to school. You could probably go become a doctor, anything you want to do you can accomplish in these countries. These are largely some of the greatest countries in the world to live, and some of the greatest celebrities and all kinds of archetypes in our history are from the black community. I consider the greatest celebrity, human celebrity, you know what I'm saying, on the planet. Now, I consider this is hands down is Michael Jackson a black individual? And if you talk about Michael and you say, well, there's a white Mike and a black Mike, not really. There is no black and white Mike. It's only it's only a black Mike. You know what I'm saying? However, even if you were to differentiate between later what Vitiligo did to him and whatnot, you're looking at, you know, most people actually like the black version of Mike better. You know what I'm saying? You got like the probably the most like attractive name out there when it comes to female celebrities is Holly Berry. You know what I'm saying? And you've got a lot of the most celebrated individuals in America as black individuals, you know what I'm saying? When it comes to advantages and stuff like that, like if you look at sports and those type of things, of course you're gonna have various advantages. If you're in a sport like horse riding where you're horseback riding, and so an individual wants to be as light as possible, as petite as possible, to put less weight on the horse, to be able to have the horse run as fast as possible. So there's certain demographic that's going to produce people that have that adaptation depending on where they live and grew and the types of food they ate and stuff like that. So you're going to see more people in that class. If you're talking about diving, where a lot of the Asians are doing very well in these diving competitions when it comes to the Olympics and whatnot. Again, because of those same type of reasons, you know what I mean? You talk about basketball where it helps to be muscular and tall and like, you know what I'm saying? You're going to have a demographic that obviously dominates that sport as well. None of this stuff, by the way, if you want to call that racist, sure, I guess you can call that racist, but it doesn't mean that, a Chinese man can't do well. You can't get a Yao Ming in basketball, but it means that that's the exception to the rule. The rule is going to be generally that there is a certain demographic that's going to outperform people in those areas because of that. Like, I believe that, I looked it up. Apparently, my particular race, Indian people, produce the least athletes in the world. Of course, depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about cricket, they're gonna produce a couple more athletes than normal, but in general, sports altogether, we're creating the least demographic in that area. So you've got all these other factors here, you know what I mean, to talk about essentially. Let's see. I'm not gonna read this. I think I kind of skipped through all of this. Let me see if I got anything else here for you guys. Not all discrimination is racism. You know what I'm saying? So, this is something I think we kind of already touched on it. So, and I probably will touch on some of the reasons as to why people are racist, for instance, right? So, let me give you this one, for instance. I experienced something akin to racism when I came to Canada. I started working with a tiling company. The tiling company would take us like really far, you know what I mean? Sometimes we work in all kinds of cities, you know what I mean? And so out there, we were largely, sometimes we were very minority, man. Like we were like the only brown people there, or the only brown and black people there. You know what I'm saying? Me and my crew and them, right? When we were out there, and so you know, bro, I want to say we experienced racism, but I also want to like get into a bit of the nuance. Let me just say the young people loved us. I'm just gonna say we did really well out there. And like we did really bad, but really well. You know what I mean? Because that time we was into partying and drinking and girls. And, you know what I'm saying? When it came to that, they treated us lavishly. Like girls loved us. Everybody, you know what I'm saying? They wanted us to. And so that was something that happened that we experienced out there on the I don't know, quote unquote positive side, if you will, right? Like we experienced a lot of love and affection from people who largely looked at us like, oh snap, like yo, we never seen these guys are exotic, they're cool, they're from out of town, they wanted to hang around us, they wanted to be our friends, they wanted to show us around, they wanted and then they got some of the older population that were concerned about us being there, of course, and you know, they treated us a certain way. But particularly on the job site, yo, the the white guys out there did not. Yo, so big ups. If any of them see this video, some of them love me now. Me and them are cool now, right? And the reason being is we clap back too. You know what I'm saying? So like sometimes we would get into scraps or we'd get into like verbal altercations and whatnot, and you know, they they will dish you something. They'll say some pretty racist things. They'll call you a monkey. They'll say all kinds of weird stuff to you. But if you're like gonna go cry about it or sob, then you're cooked. But if you're like clapping back, like you're laughing and then making back a racist joke to them or something like that, then they're cool. Ultimately, they'll drink beers with you, they'll hang out with you, and they'll kick it with you or whatever, right? But I did notice that there was a certain tension on the job site. And what I came to figure out is that a lot of these white dudes, you know, they had a cushy situation before. And so when we came into this situation, like, and some of them are white, but not really. It's kind of weird, right? And this is where this stuff comes in about, like, because some of them are like Italians and like, you know, Greek, like individual or whatever, and they came over and, you know, they were they were not white when they came, right? There was the local white people. They were immigrants at the time when they came, but they still came into a situation where even those guys before them were really nice off, and when they took over the contracts and all this type of stuff, they were giving cheaper prices, they were doing stuff easy, but they still had a cushiony situation. And then as we kept immigrating, we kept taking the contracts and underbidding, and like a lot of these guys, they used to be able to work easy and have a blast on the job site and tile a couple of tiles and, you know what I'm saying, kick in and relax, and they're making good money, they're driving a nice car, they're affording a nice house, they're living a cushy situation. And we kind of wrecked it for them. You know what I'm saying? Largely to say that like we came and we cooked the game. I'm experiencing this now as a contractor from I'm gonna say it. The Chinese are coming in. Like these mans are bringing in like 10 mans. They live in one basement. They pay $800 rent. They're paying less than $100 a pop. They're like cooking one big pot of food and eating the pot of food, and they're on a job site making pennies. And they're going back. They come here 6, 7 months, whatever they work. They go back to wherever they came from, and they take a nice little chunk of money with them. You know what I'm saying? And for them, going back home with like, I don't know, a couple $1,000 is setting them up for life. For some of us, we got rent like 2 grand, we got truck payment 2 grand, we got this, we got that. You know what I'm saying? By the time we're done, we gotta pay 10 grand a month. You know what I'm saying? We can't take jobs for the prices these mans are taking them at. Mans don't even know where they're getting their stuff from. You know? No hate. I employ Chinese people as well. You know what I'm saying? But my point is, you know, when I took a step back and tried to understand what was happening, they didn't really hate us. They didn't really, but seeing us on the job site, it was like a threat to their way of life. It was like a threat, and it was they. they probably, some of these mans probably lost their house. Probably, some of these mans probably lost their wife. You know what I mean? And can't see their children. Some of these mans probably ended up. You know what I mean? And so you can understand, like, sometimes when you see someone, especially someone who's super racist, right? You gotta ask yourself, like, you know what I'm saying? Let's say this particular white guy seems really racist or something like that. When you do sit and talk with him, maybe like a one particular black guy took, like, killed his daughter and, like, you know what I'm saying, did something. I don't know, right? I'm just saying, right? You might want to ask, hey, what happened? What's your experience? What if there's a kid who grew up and he was being robbed all the time? Every time he's around, like, black folk or brown folk, they were robbing him, or vice versa. Let's say we're the ones we're being robbed by white people. You know what I'm saying? And then we feel uncomfortable around white people. You know what I'm saying? Again, that is racist for sure. But again, there's like this trauma. There's this like thing there that is creating that perspective in that person's mind. And so anybody going through that who's experienced trauma from certain groups or demographic or whatever, you'll expect them to react a certain way. I don't know. I hope this is sort of making sense for you guys. But yeah, not everything that is seen as racist. You know, here I have this thing on Ethiopia that was uncolonized, but yet Ethiopia themselves had a whole lot of issues and a lot of, like, you know, I wanted to read it and maybe I could read some of it, right? It says Ethiopia is the most prominent example of an African nation that successfully resisted European colonization. Aside from the brief 5 year Italian occupation during World War II, it has a history of empire and Christianity dating back millennia, right? It says internal tribal disputes, right? It says despite not being shaped by colonial divide rule tactics, Ethiopia has struggled with deep seated ethnic and tribal conflict for centuries. Recent wars, such as the Tigray conflict, involved internal groups, Amhara, Omo, what is this, Oromo, and Tigarian, clashing over power and resources. My point is, bro, you know, we all want to place the blame at that. And I have, like, yo, I have tons of information here that I wanted to go through pre colonial history and universal vices, you know what I'm saying? That type of stuff. However, the point of all of this is basically just to say that, yo, this sickness. My pastor says it like this. He says it's not a skin issue, it's a sin issue. You know what I'm saying? And it's true. Every human has the propensity to evil in their heart. And the day we, like, you know, we, let's say we white, God forbid, like the, let's say, you know, Hitler had his way and he was able to wipe out everybody except for the Aryan race. I bet you people will still start fighting over other things. You know what I'm saying? Oh, we're from this area and you guys are from this area. Or your guys' blue eye is like this kind of blue and ours is this kind of blue. You know what I'm saying? Like, dog, you think humans will always struggle and fight with each other? You know what I'm saying? So it's important to understand that this is not a skin issue. This is a sin issue. I do want to encourage you, if you are any demographic and you have the amazing opportunity to live in certain countries where largely, you know, stop creating all this divide and racism. Stop creating all this stuff in your head where everybody you look at and everybody who rejects you or everybody who looks at you a certain way, oh, they're racist or something like that. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, nobody cares about your skin color or nothing like that. Most people are living their lives. They're trying to feed their family. They're trying to do their thing. And we live in some of the greatest countries in the world to be in when it comes to being, you know what I'm saying, whatever demographic you are, you know what I'm saying? We live in a land of, like, a lot of opportunities. And if you look at individuals and their life and you look at how well they're doing, you want to look at what they're doing that's right, that's leading them that way. You know what I'm saying? Even a person who inherited wealth, if he doesn't manage that wealth carefully, if he's not cautious with how he spends his money, if he doesn't have some sort of systems in place to make sure that he doesn't rinse and get rid of all the money and it just slips out of his hand, yo, he's gonna lose it, you know what I'm saying? So you definitely want to look at what those factors are. And generally, if you look at the factors that lead to success in any individual, that does not have anything to do with skin color at all, especially in these nations. A lot of times it has to do with forming good habits. You know what I'm saying? You're looking at people who wake up early, people who work hard, people who are faithful with the little, people who are wise with how they're investing, people who are, not spending their money frivolously, people who are disciplined in structuring how they budget themselves. You're looking at people who are largely, getting into communities and taking care of their mental health and taking care of their areas of discipline in their life when it comes to their dieting and eating and exercising habits and those type of things. If you're looking at anyone who's living a well-balanced, rounded lifestyle, you're going to see those effects. You're going to see them, waking up. You're going to see them putting in work. You're going to see them resisting temptation to do certain things. You're going to see them, developing healthy relationships and those type of things. And so these are the things that are going to be the difference maker in your life. Aside from all that, even if you were living in the worst systematic oppression, if you free your mind, if you free your heart, if you're right with God, you know what I'm saying, and you understand that your joy and your peace and your happiness is not going to be from external forces. You could be in jail or sick or in the hospital and dying and have more joy and peace than people who are on the outside living and whatnot. That's why you got celebrities blowing off their head and all kind of thing and doing all kind of stripness and taking drugs and dying. You know what I'm saying? You got the Elvis Presley's dying in his vomit. You got, like, you know what I'm saying, people ODing, all kind of stuff all over the place. You know what I mean? Money, fame, wealth, all this other stuff is not really the end all be all. There's something deeper, more eccentric to your personhood. I would say, part of that is finding your purpose for existing, finding, the reason for why you're here and alive, and being reconnected with God Almighty ultimately. And then, what I'm saying, being a agent for change in the world, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, I hope that was insightful. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that helps you to love and care for people and forgive people and move in a different way, not see everything as, this grim sort of, you know, reality of this weird world that we live in. We definitely live in a world that's full of sin and hate, and we need to overcome by love. And the Bible says that God is love. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray that, that becomes something that takes root in your life and bears fruit in your life. You don't know. God bless.